I talk about a lot of franchises on this channel, some that are beloved and successful, some that are despised, and some that have never been great or terrible, but there are a lot of franchises that start off strong, but don't finish properly due to a sequel not living up to expectations or making its money back. Series like Divergent, Happy Feet, and today's topic, Hoodwinked, a franchise that had a lot of potential for expansion and creative world building, but because the sequel bombed and was generally hated by the public, the franchise died instantly and was never given a third film. So today I want to talk about the quick and immediate death of the Hoodwinked franchise. So Hoodwinked started off as the ambition of two brothers, Corey and Todd Edwards, who wanted to make their own animated film. They were big fans of Shrek and wanted to make their own fairy tale satire film in the same veins as that movie, but of course to avoid getting copyrighted by Disney or DreamWorks they looked for fairy tales that hadn't been adapted for a mainstream animated movie before. They tossed around ideas of doing Pinocchio and Cinderella retellings, but dropped the ideas when they realized they were creatively limited with what they could do, since again Disney and DreamWorks covered a lot of ground with those characters, and anything relating to that would just feel repetitive. They eventually decided on Little Red Riding Hood, though they did make changes to the story, turning the story into a mystery crime thriller and emphasizing more on the intrigue of who is behind the crime, which made it stand out as its own unique fairy tale spoof and didn't step on Shrek's feet while doing it. And with the help of an indie studio called Blue Yonder Films and funding from Maurice Canbar of Canbar Studios of an $8 million budget, the film was put together. It had a different cast, like Tara Strong as Red and Sally Struthers as Granny, but when the Weinstein Company bought the rights to the film they replaced them with Anne Hathaway and Glenn Close. If you want to know more about that, I recommend this video. Hoodwinked had a limited release in 2005 for Oscar consideration and released worldwide in January 2006, and was a huge surprise hit, making over $100 million, while critics and audiences were split on it. The film was a huge triumph for the studio, and with the fact they left it open for it, they were very eager to develop a sequel. The sequel wouldn't come out until 5 years later though. It was supposed to come out in the late 2000s, and even had a tie-in with Burger King advertising toys for the sequel, but due to Canbar suing the Weinsteins for breach of agreements, the movie was delayed to 2011. Hoodwinked 2 Hood vs. Evil was finally released in April 2011, and was a box office failure and a critical catastrophe, only making over $20 million, and with its $30 million budget, this film lost the studio a lot of money. After that, the franchise was dead and done. No news of a potential third film or any desire to return to the world and characters. It was just over, and since then, Hoodwinked has not entered the public zeitgeist in any way. Nobody really talks about it anymore, and besides the story of how the first film got made, no interest has been expressed toward the IP. It is just a dead franchise. The rights to the franchise were shifted to another company after the Weinstein Company went defunct, and that is the end of the Hoodwinked franchise. So why did the Hoodwinked franchise just end and die off and disappear? Well, I don't think there's any real reason for why except unfortunate circumstances. The sequel was universally hated and failed big time at the box office, and since the results were so catastrophically bad, the Weinstein Company decided to not pursue a continuation in any way. After the sequel came out, it was gone. Nobody was talking about it or thinking about it. It was just brushed off like an annoying pest and forgotten just as fast. So I don't think we can really point to anything other than just the fact that people weren't interested in Hoodwinked anymore. It had come and gone and it had no cultural significance anymore. Plus the fact the fairy tale satire era was pretty much over around that time, since Shrek 4 was the final chapter in that franchise, and that pretty much kick-started the entire cynical take on a fairy tale genre that we saw during the 2000s. Hoodwinked was simply a product of a bygone era that no longer had a place in the zeitgeist. If the movie had come out in 2009 before Shrek 4, it probably wouldn't have great results, but it probably wouldn't have failed as hard as it did when it did release. It was obvious that Hoodwinked time in the sun was over and people had moved on and didn't want to see any more, and so Hoodwinked drifted into obscurity along with franchises like Happy Feet and Nanny McPhee. Overall, guys, the Hoodwinked franchise is both an impressive and depressing case. On one hand, it is a remarkable story about two brothers who wanted to make their stamp on the animation industry and did so by impossible measures. They made a movie with just $8 million. Got it distributed by a multi-million-dollar company, and it ended up becoming a success and a long-lasting classic to many. But on the other hand, it had so much potential as a franchise, Their take on fairy tales was unique and different compared to Shrek and Disney, and I know Hoodwinked 2 isn't great, but a lot of the concepts they introduce are very creative, like the Stark Disney Castle-themed hotel and Beanstalk Club run by the Giant. Those are all very imaginative, and they had so much more possibility to explore. The world building of Hoodwinked is incredibly thought out, but unfortunately, because the franchise has been abandoned and left in the dust, all that creative potential will never be realized and we'll just be left wondering what could have been. There's no way this franchise is continuing in any way. Nobody talks about it other than people who loved the first film, and nobody that grew up after Hoodwinked 2 came out even knows what Hoodwinked is. So because there is nobody that is for this franchise, or will be there to support it, there is likely no chance that this franchise ever comes back. And it's sad because the second film teased a promising villain and avenue they could take the story and characters in. Oh well, another franchise that ends on a cliffhanger. Thoughts how the Hoodwinked franchise died instantly after the sequel came out? Anyways guys, what do you think? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.